My name is Sarah Prestwidge. I'm a proud Darug woman, and I am playing the role of Pawang in Parrwang Lifts The Sky by Deborah Cheatham-Freyon. So I was raised by two hardcore rock and roll fans. So my journey into opera, or my desire to go into opera, was a little left field to say the least. I always loved to sing. I joined the Australian Youth Choir when I was 8 years old. And I was introduced into the classical realm. But at this stage, I still very much wanted to be the next Casey Chambers or Delta Goodrem. So piano lessons quickly ensued after that. It wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 years of age that a school teacher had suggested that I might like classical music. And so my parents swiftly researched a classical singing teacher, and I was on my way. That teacher was an opera singer, and listening to her in the lessons and being inspired just really made me want to go and see an opera. And so I dragged my parents to mine and their first opera. And that was The Magic Flute by Mozart with Opera Australia at Sydney Opera House. My young eyes were I just remember thinking, my goodness, this is the most amazing thing I have ever seen. I was enthralled by the costumes, the orchestra, that huge wash of sound coming over you from the chorus, particularly the final chorus, which is magnificent. And I think it was Emma Pearson at the time who was performing the Queen of the Night, a role that I would go on to do myself 10 years later. And you know, the high notes of the Queen of the Night's aria is mind-boggling. So I sat there, and it was one of those moments where you say, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And yeah, from there I went home and I researched artists' bios, and I discovered little pathways that I could go into this career. And I went to Sydney Conservatorium of Music. I was the very first person in my family to ever go to university, so it was a whole new ball game for all of us. When I graduated from Sydney Conservatorium of Music, I joined Pacific Opera Young Artist Program, and then auditioned for the Royal Northern College of Music in the United Kingdom, of which I was very fortunate to receive a full scholarship to study opera there. And I've had my last year freelancing, which has been amazing, up and down. Started off with nothing, and then suddenly the ball is rolling and you've got all these things lined up. And it's been very exciting, and I feel very blessed to be back here now in Australia performing the role of Pawang. I think so. I mean, they're all coming. The entire family is coming to watch Pawang. I've got, my aunties and uncles, and those that can't be here are tuning in. So I think that they've definitely got an appreciation for it now. I would say it would have to be Zerbinetta in Ariadne auf Naxos by Strauss. It's an incredible role in itself, but first and foremost, the music of Strauss is just brilliant. And whilst in this opera, it was written for a chamber orchestra, so a smaller orchestra, the music never feels thin at any point. It's always rich and at times very opulent and full of colour. But when you're up on stage, it feels like a wash of sound beneath you. And with the ebb and flow that comes with singing Strauss, there needs to be a really great connection and relationship between the conductor and the performers on stage. And that is a challenge that I love. I also just love the role of Zerbinetta. I think she's a very complex character. She is sassy, she's a bit feisty, she's very opinionated, but at the same time, she is also empathetic and has a really big heart. And I think it's just a really beautiful journey as a character. She's also part of a Commedia dell'arte group, which often means that you've got drama and dance, sometimes circus. So it's definitely a lot of fun up on stage. And then of course we have her 14-minute long aria, which is any coloratura dream, with high notes and amazing runs. And a fantastic journey. It's almost like an opera in itself. So that is a role that I've loved performing, and oh gosh, I would love to make a career out of that role. I have always loved the story of Parrwang Lifts the Sky, the creation story, since the first time I heard it and sang it with Dungala Children's Choir, the song Parrwang Lifts the Sky by Deborah Cheatham-Freyon. I've worked with Dungala Children's Choir as a conductor and music educator for a number of years now. And so when Deborah called me to say, hey, I've written this opera called Parrwang Lifts the Sky, based on that same story, and I've written the title role with your voice in mind, it was just the greatest honor. And I feel so excited to be back performing it. I think apart from it being a First Nations creation story, it is just a very Australian story. The magpie is synonymous with Australia. And I mean, I arrived from the United Kingdom last week, and the first thing I heard was the magpie in the morning, and it felt like home. So I think that is what is so special about this show, is that I think it's a piece of home for all of us. I come from a very long line of storytellers. Within my family, I have aunties and uncles that are all storytellers through various different creative media, art, song. And with that, I am also a part of the longest continuing music tradition in the world. That, I think, runs through my veins. So as a performer, first and foremost, I believe myself to be a storyteller, and that is backed by 65,000 years of tradition that I'm very proud of. It is certainly challenging because my life is very full, but at the same time, it is incredibly rewarding. I don't feel like any day feels like work for me because it's all just an incredible passion that I love to share. I've worked with Koori Radio, working with First Nations artists who are young and learning how to write songs. I've worked at Gama Music Festival as a music educator. I've worked at Sydney University Participation Outreach. I have also worked at Sydney Children's Hospital as a performer and as a music educator for the children in the children's ward. So I think for me, music, education and performing, advocacy, they all go hand in hand beautifully. I've also found that with every company that I have worked for, whether it be Opera Holland Park, in London, the National Opera Studio, where I have been a young artist, Short Black Opera, and now Victorian Opera, there is always an element of outreach and education that the performers are now required to do. And for me, it comes easy. I do come from a music education background. I enjoy giving music where music is absent. I believe that the benefits of music are far too great for people to not experience it. And so I think at the core, that is really what I am most passionate about. Again, whether that be on stage as a performer and a storyteller or in a classroom. At the core, opera transcends time. I think that it tells very human experiences from love, heartbreak, death, tragedy, family feuding, jealousy. Really, opera holds a mirror up to society. And so I think that it will always be relevant. I think what we're starting to see now, and we will continue to see, is the modern retelling of opera. In a more contemporary context for contemporary audiences. And I think that might also include translating opera into the language in the area in which it's being performed. I recently performed a fantastic production of The Barber of Seville in England, where I played the role of Rosina, and the cast were very much involved in the translation. We all kind of translated our own role into how we saw that fit. And it was a fantastic engagement from the audience. They laughed, they loved it, they understood where the plot was going. And sometimes these operas just have the most convoluted plots. So it's really our duty to make that relevant and come across to a contemporary audience. What we are seeing more of now is the emergence of fantastic new works. And they've always been there, but companies, bigger companies now commissioning them and actually recognizing them for the fantastic quality that they are. Victorian Opera does that so brilliantly, often bringing on contemporary Australian works, and Parrwang Lifts The Sky is a fantastic example of that. I've also been involved with the new production of Itch by Jonathan Dove with Opera Holland Park, which is based on a book. The year before, they produced Little Women, and most recently we have just seen the incredible success of Malcolm X, the opera at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, which brought an audience that would otherwise not attend the opera. And so I think it is our duty to be including new works in our repertoire and to be making those older works more relevant for our audiences today. I have always lived by the quote, "Dare to dream." And so that's my biggest advice to anyone, is to dare to dream. If you can dream it, then it can happen. Find someone that inspires you, look them up, research their path. Is that a path that is viable for you? But also remember that the path to success is not always linear. There are many doors and many avenues to reaching your dream. Okay, yes, that song would be the prelude actually to La Traviata, because I just think it is the most epic piece in the world. It's foreshadowing the tragedy that's going to happen in La Traviata, and I mean, who doesn't want that listening as you're walking to the bus in the morning? Just the opulence of Verdi, come on.